Hello, I'm Jonathan with Bi-vocational Ministry. Today I'm going to do a 7-year review on the MEV Bible, so stay tuned. Hey guys, I just want to take a little bit with you. I'm going to take my time, so don't prepare for a small, short video. I'm going to take my time and kind of do a 7-year review of my use of the MEV Bible. Now, beneath the video, I am going to put the timestamps beneath it, so if you want to get straight to the review, you can go straight to that. What I'm going to do, how I'm going to handle this, is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what brought me to the MEV, and then after that, I'm going to talk to you about where my journey began with the MEV, and then after that, I'm going to get into the review. So let's go ahead and get started. So I have notes here. I'm going to try to stick with those and work through this. Now, when I switched to the MEV, I had been a New King James user for many years, and I was pretty happy with it. I was never fully content with it, but I was pretty happy with it. And I used the New King James initially, like when I first started using New King James, primarily because I was a teenager and I had started serving in my church, and I wanted a Bible, and I had been given a King James when I was a little kid, and my parents went out and got me a New King James as a gift. And so I used the New King James for a number of years while serving in my church and in my local school. I served using the New King James. And over the years, I was really happy, not just then, but even afterwards, for the years I did use it, I was very happy with the formality of the New King James. I never really truly worried if the New King James represented the text well, because I felt like it always did. And it was really great for study. I would used it for my exegeticals and papers in college, and it worked out great. And it proved great for studying. It proved great for defending the faith. It didn't matter who I was talking to. The New King James was always a very sufficient translation for that. In fact, I would put the New King James right up there with the New American Standard. There were things about the New King James, and I always was curious about the formality in regards to New American Standard. But the thing about the New King James that I felt like kind of gave it an edge, outside of it being based on the TR more than the New American Standard was the fact that when the King James was translated, some of the awkwardness you get in the language of the King James is because they tried to keep some of the grammatical structures of the original language in the English text, which made it sometimes an awkward read. But at the same time, you knew that it was pretty adequate in following the grammatical structures, where I felt like the New American Standards, in my experience with it, had, even though it was formal and literal, it had reoriented the text to make more sense and be a little more clear. And I didn't really like that. I didn't like that the text I read in the New American Standard didn't necessarily follow the grammatical structure that the New King James did. So I always liked the New King James for that one. But with that, I felt like the New King James also was a bit out of date in its language. There was words that, even being translated in the 80s, they had retained, that I was just kind of like, man, that's kind of out of date. We don't say that kind of stuff anymore. And I had to learn how to use it. Even though it doesn't have a high reading level, there was still some language in it I felt was a bit out of date, and that's just me being picky. But I wanted a Bible. I eventually knew, because I used it from then, and then there was a brief stint when I was at college that I kind of took what my professor said, and they were critical text advocates, as most colleges are. And I remember asking them, I said, what is the best Bible translation? So I knew that I was in trouble when I was asking those kind of questions. And so anyway, they said, well, you want the most literal, you're going to go to NASB. They said, but if you want the most accurate, really gives you the sense of the text, you want the HCSB. It was a Southern Baptist college, and the HCSB is a Southern Baptist translation. So if that tells you anything about where the translation stands. So I was given an HCSB as one of those little $8 little thin lines, and I loved it. It was perfect for me at that time. Even though I'd grown up in church and actually served a little bit in my church and in the school, I actually had very little experience with biblical literature. I look back and it was shocking of how little experience I had with biblical literature, even though I had grown up in church. And I'm sure some of you probably can relate with that. And for someone who didn't have a lot of experience with biblical literature, the HCSB was perfect for me. When I read it, my comprehension level was right there. I didn't always understand, but I always could comprehend what I was reading, and I really loved it. I really loved the HCSB, and I did that for about a year. And when I had finished reading through it, I carried it for a little bit. And I never had a problem reading the text and making an immediate connection with the text because of the way it was translated. And to be honest with you, when I started delving into the textual debate, because I took a class called How We Got the Bible, and it put me to the HCSB, and then I started reading some other literature that started moving me away. And when I finally had come to the conclusion that I was not a critical text advocate, even if I may not be a complete TR guy, but I was not a critical text advocate after a couple of years, after about a year, and so I had to move from that and I moved back to the New King James, HCSB, back to New King James, and it was more of a switch that I felt like was necessary, not something I necessarily wanted to do. So I started using the New King James, used it for many years, and I actually missed that old Bible because I missed the immediate connection I had with it. So I moved to the New King James and I used it and it served me well. But I was always hoping that there would be a modern translation put in a modern vernacular that I could give somebody who was not experienced in biblical literature that could make an immediate connection like I did with the HCSB, and yet be based off the TR and what I would consider better manuscripts. And I've always hoped for that, and I would watch, and I would watch to see if a new Bible translation come out. I ordered the WEB, I think it's an EMTV, English Majority Text Version. I ordered numerous Bibles, and I just really wanted that. And so I watched, and when I saw the MEV came out, I immediately put my order in, and that's actually the time when I was starting to do my church plant, and I ordered the MEV. And so when I first got MEV, I was tremendously excited. Here's a modern translation. And so that was when I got introduced to this Bible. This is the very first Bible I ever ordered. I ordered this in the spring of 2015. And that, of course, that's 7 years ago now. And I got it, and I was excited about it. And I immediately started reading through it and getting into it and digging into it. And when I got into the MEV, I'll be honest with you, I loved it, but there were a few things that perturbed me, and I'm going to give you those a little bit. So, Genesis 1:28 perturbed me. So, and this was my initial experience with the HCSB. It's my initial experience with the MEV. And so, Genesis 1:28 says, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, and subdue it. Now, that's not the whole verse, but the fact that it used the word replenish instead of fill kind of bothered me. Because I'm like, I know the King James did, and I knew that they were trying to keep that, but I really felt like fill should have been a better translation. And then another example of what kind of perturbed me was Micah 5:2. Because I had done some work in defending the deity of Christ in my background, Micah 5:2 really meant a lot to me. And when I read it in here, in the MEV, I was kind of disappointed with how it said it. It says, but you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, although you are small among the tribes of Judah, from you will come forth for me one who will be ruler of Israel. Good so far. His origins are from old. That bothered me at first. Now, it doesn't bother me as much now because I know that originally he was in eternity. Okay? He was in eternity, stepped into creation. I know that. But when I first read like origins, it made it sound like he had a beginning, and I didn't like that. And then it said, we're from old, from ancient days. And I'm like, no. The New King James said from everlasting. I'm like, it should be from everlasting, not ancient days. And so that perturbed me. And then another example of something that perturbed me when I first started reading it was 1 Peter 1:13. Said this. It says, therefore, guard your minds, be sober, and hope to the end for the grace that is to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. And I'm like, guard your minds. And I'm like, and I knew what the transliteration was, gird up the loins of your minds, and gird up the loins, which means to prepare your minds for action. And I'm like, what do you mean guard your minds? And what I'm like, what they should actually have it written down here is put your minds on guard. Put your minds on guard. Get them ready for action. That's what means put on guard is, be on guard. Put your minds on guard is how I felt like they should translate. If you want to use the word guard, it's put your minds on guard, not guard your minds. And those are just little nitpicky things that I had that kind of perturbed me when I first read it. I was like, ugh. But there was a few things about the New King James that perturbed me as well. And with every Bible I've ever had, I've never had one that I agreed with every single translation that was in it. So, but since that time of picking up the Bible and getting the MEV and having it delivered to my house, I've been a happy MEV carrier. I've been a happy MEV carrier, and I use it for my family devotions. I use it for preaching. I use it for evangelism. I use it for defending the faith. When I was running an academy for a few years, and I used it to teach at the academy. I used the MEV, and it worked great. Now, and I've been content with the MEV, very content. And now, for me, this is how I do it. I read other versions. I read through different versions of the Bible, but I carry the MEV, and I've gladly carried it, and I've been content with it. Now, to be very open about it, I have bought 7 MEVs, one for my son, one for my wife, and 5 for me. Anyway, so I bought 5 or 7 MEVs in my lifetime, since this one. And when I was pastoring at the church down there, when I was pastoring at the church, I bought 75 hardbound copies of the MEV to stock our pews and stock our resource center with. And so I bought quite a few MEVs, and I was always a big proponent of that. And I've really liked it. So let's go ahead and take this time. I've kind of given you what brought me to the MEV. Shared me the initial part of my journey. Now I'm going to give you this review, and this is over 7 years of reading, studying, preaching from, family devotions, teaching in an academy, and using regularly. Okay, this is an intense. It's a review based off experience. I'm not going to go in all the time to give you all the details, but it's based off tremendous experience, and I'm going to give you that review now. The way I'm doing it is a rating of 1 to 10. 1 is very poor, 10 is very, very high. And I'm just going to tell you now, the MEV rate's very high in my book, so you just be prepared for that. So the first area that I looked for of the MEV is how well it reflected the TR. I was convinced that the TR was the proper text for the church, at least sufficient text for the church. I was not a critical text advocate, and even though I went through a phase of critical text, majority text, and then eventually into the TR preferred, I was wanting a Bible that preferred the TR Textus Receptus, received text. And I rated the MEV a 9.8. That's pretty high. I felt like, for the most part, the MEV did a great job representing the TR. Even though there was a few places that I felt like could have been a little closer, a little better, for the most part, it was great. It was right there where it needed to be. And just to kind of give you a perspective, and one thing I did also like about the MEV is it didn't give all the different manuscript information. So you're not going to go through and say, well, the critical text says this, or the majority text says this. And even though I'd come to a firm position, whenever I read through my New King James, all those notes, I would always check those notes, and then I would find myself saying, which one really is the best reading and all that. And even though even though I'm very comfortable with my position, there was a while that I wasn't, and those notes were very distracting to me. And I was concerned that if I had given that to a new believer, and they said, what are these notes? Well, so those are all the different manuscripts. I had to explain textual criticism. And I love that the MEV basically said, this is the text. We are a TR. It's a TR translation. It doesn't footnote all the differences, which I actually prefer. I'm not against studying it, and if you do any kind of exegetical work, you will study it. But I didn't want it to always distract me from my Bible reading, and I didn't want it to distract a new disciple from reading their Bible. And so I appreciate that. And the one footnote that I did see in the MEV, I took care of that pretty quick. I studied out the position of 1 John 5:7, the Comma Johannium, and I come to the conclusion, based off the readings of the church fathers and other historical arguments, that it should be in our text. It should be in our Bible. But they footnoted it saying it, and this is what I did with the footnote. That's what I did with it right there. Right there, that's the footnote. And I took care of that. But, and so again, I don't have an issue with people studying that issue, and I studied it for many years myself. I just didn't want to always be in my face. I had come to a firm conclusion that this was the right text, and I just wanted to read my Bible and say, this is the text I want to use, and read it, and all that. So I rated it a 9.8. Excellent job. I might even rate it even a little bit higher than I gave 9.8, but I think it did a really good job of bringing the TR Masoretic text into the 21st century. Good job. Okay, 9.8. The next area was the area of accuracy. Now, I know that there is no Bible that is perfectly accurate. If it was perfectly accurate, you would have trouble reading it. Okay, that's why Young's Literal Translation or the Literal Standard Version sometimes is hard to read because it's so literal that it makes really hard English. And I know that you're never going to have that perfect accurate. In fact, I don't want necessarily a Bible that's perfectly accurate. I understand that there's a balance between accuracy and readability. And again, like I told you, my goal was to find a TR translation that I could connect with, or I could give it to someone who could connect with, like I did the HCSB. The HCSB wasn't necessarily a Bible that was spot on accurate, but I was able to connect with it. It was faithful and trustworthy, and that's what I wanted in a Bible. It was important to me that a translation that I was using and giving to others was faithful to the original languages at conveying what they said in English, so that way they had a good understanding. Now, I personally see the New King James and the King James as sufficient for accuracy. I see them sufficient for accuracy, and I would rate both very high. I would rate New King James, King James both very high in accuracy, and I've always appreciated that about the New King James. But with the MEV, I wanted accuracy, but I wanted accuracy leaning towards clarity, readability, with the goal of comprehension in the modern vernacular. So yes, I want accuracy, but I wanted accuracy leaning towards the comprehension of the reader, and I was okay, and I thought the MEV did a very good job. I liken it to a position, if I could find a comparison here, I like it to a position of someone who says, boy, I love the accuracy of the New American Standard, but I preach and minister and serve and carry and read the ESV because it's readable, because it speaks in a way that people can understand, and that's why I carry it. But when I want to study, go to the New American Standard. That's how I was. I love carrying and reading and studying out the MEV, but if I ever start getting a big text, I always pull out my King James and New King James to see what they say. And those are my NASBs, and the MEV is my ESV in that sense, or CSB, if depending on that's the translation you use. And I give the MEV a 9. Now remember, this is 9 in the area of accuracy. It does a good job of being accurate to the original language, but in a modern vernacular that's understood. It's exactly what I was looking for. It is faithful. It is accurate. It is a formal translation. It is not interpreting the text for me. It is translating the text for me, but not interpreting it. That mattered to me. I didn't want someone to tell me what they think it said. They want them to tell me what it said in a way that I could understand, comprehend, and understand. And I would gladly give the MEV to a new believer or a seasoned saint for their growth and edification. So I rate it here as a 9, and that's actually a good rating for me in regards to that. So good. The next one is the readability. So the translation is, again, I'm going to say it again, is excellent at its readability. So my goal for those I'm working with is comprehension with eventual understanding. I've shared this in the previous video. I'm going to share it with you now. You're not going to understand everything you read in the Bible the first time you read it. It's just not, that's not realistic. You're not going to understand it, but you should be able to comprehend what you read. You'll never understand what a text means unless you first understand what the text says. And if I'm giving you a Bible translation that you're having trouble understanding what the text says, it's going to be really hard for you to make that jump over into what the text means. So my goal was for a Bible to be in the modern vernacular so someone could read it and know what the text says. There's a comprehension of what's said in the text in the mind of the reader. I wanted that. So that way, and again, they're not going to immediately understand everything they read, but that way at least they have a comprehension and they can start understanding what it means by what it says. And so the goal for me was comprehension. And I'll say you cannot understand what a text means unless you can first comprehend what it says. And the goal of the MEV was, as far as I understand, to provide a 21st century update of the King James that was faithful to the King James and do the same thing King James did in its day. It was faithful to the original languages and faithful to providing a reader with the Bible that was reliable, readable, and trustworthy. And that they could use it day in and day out and know that they were reading something, reading a Bible that they could trust. Let me say this. Bravo. Bravo to the translators, to the publishing house. Bravo. I rated it 10. This was exactly what I was looking for in a modern translation. That's why I've carried it for 7 years. That's why I've used it in my family devotions. That's why I bought it for my family. That's why I stocked it in my resource center. That's why I put it in our pews. That's why I recommend it to every when I talk to people about Bible translation, I say you need to get an MEV. And I continue to do so, and I will continue to do so. And thank you. I appreciate that. And so the MEV Bibles, and so you get a 10. You get a 10 here. Love it. The way I said it here is you have gifted the reader with comprehension without robbing the author of their intention. Okay? You have gifted the reader with comprehension without robbing the author of their intention. Thank you. And then the last area was durability. How well these Bibles stood up over the test of time. And you probably saw it in a previous video where I had the MEV I carry now, which is a thin line, but it's a chestnut brown with the tan. And these Bibles have held up very well. For what? Now, I'm not comparing these Bibles to the $200 Bibles, $300 Bibles. I'm comparing them to like Bibles. If I bought a thin line that was Thomas Nelson, if I bought a thin line that was Holman, if I bought a thin line that was Zondervan, how well does this Bible hold up? Because I've had Bibles hold up and I've had Bibles fall apart. These are excellent. Now, I'm not gentle with my Bibles. I use my Bibles. I carry them. For me, they're like tools. Okay, they're meant to be used. And it's like, and if you buy tools, you find out that if you buy a tool that breaks within the first year, you don't buy it again. You buy something else. But these have held up very well and have been all over the place with me, and I've just been very pleased with it. And they're second to none in my opinion. And in regards to Leather Soft, this is not the best example, but with my other one, the Leather Soft have been awesome. It seems to look better as time goes on, like genuine leather would. And it also has held up, and it's still beautiful. And I just love it, and I just think it's great. So 10. So what is my overall average MEV? 9.7 out of 10. The MEV Bible for me was the best of both worlds. I could use it for academic study. I could use it for preaching. I could use it for comprehension, new disciple. I could use it for my family, for my 10-year-old. I could use it to defend the faith against someone who to someone who's not a believer or trying to defend the faith. Excellent, excellent, excellent. If you want a Bible that's understandable and yet accurate, the MEV is your choice. Period. Bar none is your choice. You need to know that the MEV is not a literal translation. I said that earlier, a literal version, but it is a formal translation. It basically is into the vernacular and is faithful to the author and usable to the reader, as I said before. And in line with the heritage of the King James, it's a tremendous blessing to the church of the 21st century. The 21st century church, I think, is very blessed to have this translation in their tool bench. And I think we should make good use of it. I think we should buy it. I think we should use it. I think we should give it out and make it go up popular. Now, the only thing I've ever struggled with is its lack of popularity. I wish more people carried this Bible. I don't know a lot of people who carry this Bible within my circles. And I wish it was more popular. I think people who've studied the issues out have come to a conclusion and actually have looked into it. I think the MEV is on their shelf at least. But I wish more people had it. And I'm looking forward to the day when it is popular and used and the church at large has it and uses it. So for the future, I want to give you some recommendations to the MEV people out there if you're thinking about what you're thinking about doing in the future. I would really like a journaling Bible that was not geared towards a particular gender. I got my wife the MEV Journaling Bible, and she loves it. But I want one. I want one. I want an MEV Journaling Bible. I would love to read through it and just write my notes right beside the text. So if you could make a journaling Bible, that'd be awesome. Don't do it just for me, but I'm sure I'm not the only one out there that would love an MEV Journaling Bible. The next thing I think that you should do is make one of those New Testament Psalms like the Gideons give out as a New Testament Psalms and Proverbs right there in that little book. I would love to have a whole bunch of those in MEV so I can give them out to people just like a Gideon would if I give it in the MEV. Perhaps even making there's a lot of churches hand out little books of John and Romans together. I like to have that in the MEV, John and Romans, to give that out to people. I think it would be really nice to have some genuine leather Bibles, and I'm looking as the MEV grows in popularity that the genuine leather would come out. That you'd have some genuine leather Bibles. And I also think it would be good for eventually to publish a minister's Bible. I like carrying a minister's Bible, and I know other ministers who carry minister's Bible around all the time. And it would be really great if I could get a minister's Bible in the MEV. And as I work with other students, and as I regularly I talk to people who are going into the ministry, it'd be really nice for them to have a minister's Bible. So let me give you a couple more things. First off is an update about the future. The update is coming. I don't know exactly when, but the update is coming and should be out soon. As far as I understand, the updated text of the MEV is already complete. It's already updated. It's already complete. They're waiting for their current stock to sell out. I'm sure that sounds familiar. But it should be out, and they're thinking that it's going to be out sometime in 2022. So it is going to get out. They're not walking away from it. He said that the publishing house is in it for the long haul. They're going to continue to move forward with it. They're going to continue to not give it up. So they said that they're in it for the long haul. So if you're thinking that's not going to happen, they said that you're incorrect. That it is going to come out. And as far as I understand, it's supposed to come out in a variety of formats. So all the formats that we've always wanted to be great to have the MEV, like I just mentioned, it's supposed to be coming out, and that's exciting. That's exciting. So that's my review of the MEV. Again, I gave it a 9.7 out of 10, and I think it's a great translation. I think you should continue to read it, use it, buy it, and give it out. And go out there and serve Jesus, please. Oh, and that's the other thing. I was going to mention one last thing before I go. I am publishing a book, and the primary translation that I use in the book is the MEV. That's not the only translation I use in the book, but it is the primary translation I use in the book, and I'm looking forward to having that out. And I probably, once it comes out, I'll share it with you. And if you would like to get a copy, you can gladly get a copy, and you'll notice that I use the MEV quite a bit in that book. So, on that note, you guys have a great day. God bless. Go tell someone about Jesus. Come on, go tell someone about Jesus. All right, we'll see you later. Bye.